wanna know Jesus and do the things that he did. We wanna know Jesus. We wanna grow like him. We wanna know Jesus and do the things that he did. Smile to somebody if you can. Smile. Say hello to somebody if you can. Say hello. Wave somebody if you can. You can do it. And grab a watermelon in your hand.
This song coming up is a Swahili song. It says Baba Yetu. Baba Yetu is our God. Our God who is in heaven. Not hallowed be thy name, but we are thanking him for his creation and his everything. So feel free to dance. If you don't know what to do, look at us, we'll show you what to do. So just move from side to side. Let's go, side to side. Hey, hey, hey. Baba yetu wa mbinguni tunaleta sifa sote, wewe hulinganishwi na yeyote duniani, mbingu na nchi za kusifu, jua na mwezi vya kutukuza, wanyama wa pori, ndege wa angani, sifa tele kwako Bwana. Oh yeah, sifa zetu, oh yeah, ni zako zote, oh yeah, usifiwe, oh yeah, imba, oh yeah, sifa zetu, oh yeah, ni zako zote, oh yeah, usifiwe, oh yeah, milele Bwana. Cheza, 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 cheza. Tukiomba kwako Baba, sikio lako ni wazi kwetu, macho yako yatuona sisi watoto wako. Ulimtoa Yesu mwana wako wa pekee, alikufa msalabani, sasa tuko huru. Oh yeah, sifa zetu, oh yeah, ni zako zote, oh yeah, usifiwe, oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah, sifa zetu, oh yeah, ni zako zote, oh yeah, usifiwe, oh yeah, milele Bwana. Cheza, 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 cheza. Imba, oh yeah, sifa zetu, oh yeah, ni zako zote, oh yeah, usifiwe, oh yeah, milele Bwana. Oh yeah, sifa zetu, oh yeah, ni zako zote, oh yeah, usifiwe, oh yeah, milele Bwana. Let's give the Lord a hand clap. Still ask your neighbor to give you space. We are not yet done. We have just started. familiar song. When we get to Akonami, we can just move side to side as we point to our chest. And the other way, side to side as we point to our chest. That's the only thing I'd ask you to do.
Ni
Indeed, He's a good Lord, and even as we just surrender ourselves in His presence and allow His Spirit to manifest in us and just dwell in us and take over our bodies and our souls, I ask you to surrender to the Spirit, because the Spirit is nowhere else but here. Surrender to the Spirit and allow it to just use you to declare praise and worship and honor and all those things. Surrender for encouragement, surrender for His will, surrender everything, your life, your finances, your loved ones, I just ask you to take a few minutes to surrender something to the Lord and allow Him to just take control of whatever situation it is. So just a few minutes to surrender to Him.
Trust your spirit is enough to keep me walking. You guide my every step, speak life to me again. Lord, I need you. Oh, I need you. I lift my hands to heaven, hear my tell my soul again, you are Lord of all. And though the seas are raging, you will speak and tame them. And you will find my rest, you are in control. Trust in only you. No one can add to your perfection. You're the beginning and the end. More speak and tame them. In you I find my rest. You are in control. I lift my hands and hear my heart surrender. I tell my soul again, you are Lord of all. Though the seas are raging, you will speak and tame them. In you I find my rest. You are in control. In you I find my rest. You are in control. Lord, you are a good God, and that's why we're inclined to just surrender to you and allow you to take over. Lord, open up our hearts and our minds and our souls to just receive you. May the words that we sing reflect from our hearts. Lord, anything that we sing, may we sing it with meaning. Lord, that you may use the simple words that we use to speak every day to just manifest in our lives. Lord, we know that we're all from different places. We come from different homes. We come from different areas of Nairobi. But Lord, allow us to let you take control. And in this moment, allow us to just sing of your goodness. In times of celebration, we see that you're good. Lord, may we see that you're good even in times of death. Even in times that we lack, Lord, may we see your goodness. The times that we feel weary, may we see your goodness. The times that we need encouragement, may we feel your goodness. The times that we need you, may we see your goodness. Even in times that we don't feel like there's any goodness in this world, may we see your goodness. For Lord, your goodness has no bounds. It's not tied to anything, and you alone can give you goodness. So allow us to see the good in everything, to see the good in our friends as well as in our enemies, to see the good in our parents, to see the good in our siblings, to see the good in our employers, to see the good in our lives, to see the good in our neighbors. Never fail.
It's running after me. Your goodness is running after. It's running after me. With my life laid down and surrender now, I give you everything. Your goodness is running after. It's running after me. Your goodness, Lord.
Your goodness is running after. It's running after me.
See your goodness.
Your goodness is running after. It's running after me. With my life laid down and surrender now, I give you everything.
Your goodness, Lord.
Your goodness is running after. It's running after me.
Your goodness.
Your goodness is running
Your
after.
goodness.
It's running after me.
Your goodness, Lord.
Your goodness is running after. It's running after
My
me.
life laid down.
With my life laid down and surrender now, I give you everything. Your goodness is running after. It's running after me.
Your goodness, Lord.
Your goodness is running after. It's running after me.
Your goodness,
Your
Lord.
goodness is running after. It's running after me. With my life laid down and surrender now, I give you everything. Your goodness is running after. It's running after me.
'Cause all my life you have been faithful. Sing it from your heart.
All my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am able, oh, I will sing of the goodness of God.
Sing all my life as a prayer. One more time.
All my life you have been faithful.
Sing all my life.
All my life you have been so, so good.
With every breath.
With every breath that I am able, oh, I will sing of the goodness of God.
I'm gonna sing.
I will sing of the goodness of God.
I'm gonna sing. Oh,
I will sing of the goodness of God.
We are in 1 Samuel chapter 12. And the hope is that most of you have been on this journey of the different chapters together with us. If you haven't, please, they are all online. Take a moment to go and catch up just so you're able to flow with what the theme and the story and the narrative through this book has been. And today we are coming to the point where Samuel is basically handing over his leadership and rule over the nation of Israel to Saul, and is handing over speech. And you can imagine, like when there's a coronation of a president, and the former one is giving all the tools and instruments of power, and it's that kind of thing that's happening. And the thing we want to ask ourselves today is, because there is a lot about how Samuel ends that chapter that lends us, that section that lends us to thinking about how we finish in our lives. And challenging ourselves, what does it look like to finish strong? I'm sure you've not heard that statement, finish strong, for the first time today. It's a common statement. It's one of those things that's often talked about in very many Christian circles. How do we finish strong? But I think the reason we keep talking about it is because we are still pretty much doing poorly on it. What does it look like if we are going to finish strong? I enjoy watching mini sports. And the one thing that lies true in sports is the whole idea of finishing strong. Recently, they just finished the World Athletic Championships. And it's so interesting how, especially in the long distance races, you'd see these guys with all the energy and zeal, and this other person at the back just taking their time, just enjoying, just pacing. And you know how the race is going to end. Even as you watch it, even you can tell the way you've started, you're not going to finish. Too much psych, you're not going to finish. You know, it's like how Arsenal started last season, you know, just so much psych, and then you just can't finish strong. I'm sure I've made some enemies. We will deal with each other after the service. But one of the activities that I have found has been really interesting in challenging myself around how we prepare for finishing strong has been an interesting time when someone asked us in a group to write our eulogies. Yeah, now those of you who are African, you're like, why are we dealing with death? Why are we provoking death before it comes? And that was a really interesting activity. To pretty much write out, if you had the chance to say the words that you'd want people to share when you're gone and how you'd want them to remember you, what would you put down? How would you want to be remembered? And I remember when we did that activity, you realize, I am far from how I want to be remembered. And it puts things into perspective with regards to when my time comes to an end, how do I need to live now that I would feel I have actually finished strong? What do we need to do now? And not just with regards to the entirety of our lives, but even in the different roles we play, jobs, projects, some which we will transition through, many of them. What does it look like to ensure that in everything we will do and touch, both in the entirety of our lives, but even the small things we keep doing and the different seasons, that everything we do, we end up finishing strong? There's a race that I think should come back to the Olympics. I discovered that there used to be a race when Olympics games had begun, where the runner was not the one who finished first, but it was the one who finished. They used to run with the torches. And the one who finished with the torch still on is the one who actually had won the race. I think I want it back because that one I can participate. The issue is just keeping the torch on. And so let's look at our passage today and see what can we glean and learn about finishing strong. The story so far in the book of Samuel is that we start and we're introduced to the character of Samuel through his mother, Hannah, who was an amazing woman but had been barren and broken for very long. She prays, and God finally grants her prayer and gives her a son. And as she had promised in her prayers, she gives back her son to the Lord. So she takes him to the temple, and he's raised there. And he's raised by a man called Elkanah, who guides him and helps him learn to hear God and respond to God. And we later see Samuel becoming a prophet and pretty much a judge, giving God's leadership over his people of Israel. We see Samuel, through God, be helped to even lead the Israelites through battle against the Philistines. And while all this is happening, and please note, this had been a constant theme of how God and the Israelites were interacting. God would constantly raise judges to lead, to be his mouthpiece, to be his hands and mouthpiece over the people of Israel. But then the Israelites look around and they see the nations around them, and they are becoming great nations with great kings, and they decide, no, that's the direction we want to go into. We want a king. And despite Samuel's warnings, they insist, we want a king. And God says, fine, I shall grant you a king. And interestingly, as much as this was not what God had desired for them at this time, God still goes ahead, selects a person, anoints a person, and that is Saul, and fills Saul with his Holy Spirit. Saul even reaches a point where he's now prophesying and helps Saul win some battles and gain confidence with the people of Israel that he can lead them. They go through their own version of elections, and the very person God had anointed that even no one else had known about, who is Saul, becomes the king, and just affirming how it is God who selects those who will lead, even when we think it's our choices. And that brings us to this point where Samuel is now doing okay, so this is the king you have chosen, this is the king God had anointed, and I need to hand over to him. In the book of 1 Samuel chapter 12. And I think there are some really interesting things we can learn from what Samuel does at this point when he's handing over. The first is that, and allow us to turn there real quick. 1 Samuel chapter 12 from verse 1, Samuel says to Israel, "Behold, I have listened to your voice in everything you have said to me, and have appointed a king over you. And now here is the king walking before you. As for me, I am old and gray, and here are my sons with you. I have walked before you from my childhood to this day. Here I am, testify against me before the Lord and his anointed. Whose ox have I taken, or whose donkey have I taken, or whom have I exploited? Whom have I oppressed, or whose hand have I taken a bribe to blind my eyes? I will restore it to you." They said, "You have not exploited us or oppressed us or taken anything at all from a man's hand." Samuel said to them, "The Lord is a witness against you, and his anointed is a witness this day that you have not found anything in my hand." And they answered, "He is a witness." I think about what Samuel does at the end of his role in leading the Israelites, and the courage to come and ask them, "Who have I taken anything from?" And this is standing publicly and saying, "God is your witness. And the person he has anointed Saul is also a witness. Declare it today. If I have ever oppressed you, if I have ever exploited you, if I have ever taken something from you, if you've ever bribed me to get you anything, today is your chance to declare." I think about it and I'm like, 360 appraisals clearly had been created before our recent days. But how courageous is that? How courageous is it at the end of a role to be able to stand before every single person you've engaged with and were leading and were involved in and working with, and have the courage to ask, say if there's anything wrong I have ever done. Declare it now publicly. Not in private, in an office one-on-one where we can have this conversation. Declare it now publicly. And I think there is something that speaks to someone's courage to be able to do that. A large part of it must have been because he must have been sure there is nothing that can be held against me. I have honored God, I have been faithful, I have been diligent in how I have executed my tasks and my role. And it gives me the credibility to stand and say, declare it now today. But I also think he meant it. That if by any chance maybe it's me who's forgotten, I will repay every single thing I have ever taken from anyone. I don't want to end with any bad blood or anything being held against me in my role. So often, when we think about our tasks and our roles and the things we have done and the amount of interesting relationships we've left hanging out somewhere, and if people were to be asked, if we were to stand before all the people we engage with and work with and ask, is there anything I have done against you? What would the people around us say? What would be their remark about us? I think it helps to think this way as we think about finishing strong. Because it then holds us to a different standard of how we carry ourselves today. If we realize that God is not just calling us to look good and to grow in positions. Someone could easily have said, okay, so I'll take it and move on, and not taken the time to challenge how he had actually done his role. If we're going to finish strong, we have to have the courage to know that in how we interact, we must hold ourselves to a higher standard than what everyone else in this world holds themselves to. That we are holding ourselves to a standard where we can stand before God and before men and say, if there's anything wrong I have done, tell me now. But not only is it being able to hold ourselves to that standard, but actively pursuing it. You see, I don't know if you've, when I think about what Samuel is asking them, in weddings often there's a question that's asked where if there's anyone who has any objection to these two getting married, declare it now or forever hold your peace. Now, most of the time we ask that question as a formality, but we rarely expect anyone to actually say anything. I mean, I have not yet been in a wedding where I've seen someone actually rise up and say something against the couple. But I don't think Samuel was doing this as a formality. I know there are times we sit in meetings and say, is there anyone who can hold this against me? But there's something about the heart and the repetition with which he says, God is your witness. Say it now. There's something about that Samuel actually desired to ensure that in how I live, in how I end, let nothing be held against me. But it's also very interesting that the very things he asks them, if he's done against them, are the very things he told them a king will come to do against you. That a king will come and he will take from you. He will exploit you. He will take your resources for himself. When he was warning them when they were beginning to ask for a king. And it's as though he's saying, as we end this season of God reigning, let's make sure you realize that there was a difference in the people that God was choosing to reign and when they were being led by God. We need to realize in whatever tasks we do, in whatever roles we are in, we are God's representatives, we are God's stewards, just like Samuel was. And so how do we challenge ourselves that this is the standard to which we hold ourselves? To challenge ourselves that there's a higher appraisal that is standing for us. To work as God modeled for us in Genesis, where at the end of every day he said, what I have done is good. That at the end of any role or project or task, or at the end of our lives, that we can sit back with courage and say, if there's anything anyone can hold against me, say it now. And the beauty is, Samuel was not a perfect man. I mean, his kids were rejected as leaders. And we're not being called to a standard of perfection, but we're being called to strive towards a godly standard of excellence, towards God's standard of how we interact with people, of how we carry out our tasks. But the beauty with that is because it is God who's calling us to that standard. He's the same one who can look at us now and say, okay, yes, so far what we've done, we've not done well. If we were to be appraised now, there's a lot that can be held against us. But God is the same one who, as we were singing today, died for us on the cross to give us a fresh start. And so it doesn't matter whether if we look back now, we know there's a lot that needs to be corrected. But if you were to challenge yourself from today, what would it look like to operate at this kind of standard that Samuel set? But the other thing is, Samuel also looks at the people of Israel. And he takes them through a journey in the rest of that chapter of how God had constantly delivered them from Egypt and raised Moses to come and help them. And the different judges, every time they would cry upon the Lord, that God would raise for them to save them and deliver them and lead them in victory. And then he reminds them, God has taken you through all that. And then now you've looked at your neighbors and you've cried out for a king. And Samuel does not mince his words when he reminds them what you have done is wrong. You have sinned against the Lord in your request for a king. This same God. But he tells them it's okay. You have made that mistake. He doesn't tell them last warning, renounce your king. He actually tells them, but if you and your king fear the Lord, serve him, and obey his commands, it shall be well with you. And I think that's really encouraging for us. To be able to say, okay, the start of my race has not been the best. The way I have carried out myself and my life is not leading itself to finishing strong this far. There's a lot of things I look back and I wish I could correct. I wish I could change. But Samuel is saying, okay, you've made that mistake. But if from today you choose to fear God, to serve him, to obey his commands, then it shall actually go well with you. I had a boss once who used to give instructions without giving them. So he'd come and say, if I were you, I'd move that chair, but hey, and he moves on. And in my immaturity, I didn't understand that's an instruction. I said, hey, that's him, but me, if I were me, I'd do it this other way. And so I'd go ahead and do it my own way. And often that led to quite some problems. And then you come back swallowing a big humble pill. And because you now need the boss to help you bail out this mess that you've created. And I began learning just the joy of learning from him and hearing his even subtle instructions and how that continued to grow me. You see, we serve a God who not always is going to force our hand. He didn't force the hand of Israel. He told them, if I were you, I would not take a king. I would allow me to continue leading you the way I have. And I know right now you're looking and you can't see where our leader is coming from, but I have always faithfully raised a leader for you. So if I were you, just continue following my instructions. And that's how God often operates with us in our lives, is that there are many things he desires for us to do. And he says, if I were you, I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't walk there. I wouldn't make that choice. I wouldn't talk like that. I wouldn't respond like that. And often we do, yeah, but you're not me, so let me do it this way. And we make messes. But the beauty of the God we serve is that this does not mean we can't finish strong. So many times we hear this statement, finish strong, and we look at our lives and say, that's for someone else. It's clearly for guys who have run their whole lives thus far well. But the beauty of our God is he can allow us, even at the very end of the finish line, towards the end of it, to still finish strong. If we obey him, serve him, fear him, lean on him, and not on our own understanding. He is a God of second chances. He is a God of grace. But I look at this story in the Old Testament and I wonder how people continually say, oh, but you see God's character in the Old Testament, he was not a God of grace. I'm like, no. Do you see what he does with Israel? They literally say, if they want their own king, he finds a king for them. He anoints a king, prepares a king for them. And he still walks to them and says, okay, you've hurt me, you've disobeyed me, but from now on, if you obey me and serve me, we will sort this out. He is a God of grace. And there is a journey that I have found myself having to go through even as I think about finishing strong, that I have to forgive myself about the many mistakes I have made in the different roles and spaces I have been in. Because as long as we are carrying the weight of everything we have done and been through, then we won't finish strong. Today we were reminded, cast our burdens unto Jesus, for he cares for us. And I think that's a big part of what it will require for us to cross that line strong in the different spaces and things we do. But it's also very interesting how Saul also helps give us some insight about finishing strong. You see, Saul starts as a very peculiar character. He himself would never have considered himself fit to be king. God selects him, anoints him out of the blue, and gives him a chance to actually be a great king. If people were going to be judged pretty much by only how they start, Saul should have been one of the greatest kings. Starts with great victories, full of the Holy Spirit, prophesying, anointed, handsome and tall. What more do you need? But it's not enough to lean only on how we start. And for some of us, that's the challenge with our finishing strong. For some of us, it's that we have had such an amazing start that we have a self-belief that we are going to finish strong. We are rocking it in the things we are doing. And unfortunately, perhaps it is beginning to blind us to what we need to ensure we are putting in place to help us finish strong. It is blinding us from the humility to realize we will not finish strong if we don't lean on God. And the humility to realize I am not rocking it. God is rocking my path. It is not me. And you realize that from Saul's journey. Saul starts amazingly well. But later on in his journey, he slowly, in small instances, begins forgetting God and begins leaning more on himself. He begins feeling, okay, I can even do this role that was reserved for the prophet. I can do this, I can do that, I can disobey here. I don't have to follow every instruction. And God makes it clear, because you did not fear me, obey my commands, and serve me faithfully, I have begun raising another king already. And clearly we all know Saul's journey didn't end well. We can't lean on the potential. We can't lean on the great start. We can't lean on our amazing talents and our abilities to perceive that we are going to finish strong. The same way for Israel, who had continually made blunders, they needed to lean on God, fear him, and serve him to finish strong. The same way, that is the only thing that enabled Samuel to finish strong. That was the very mistake that Saul made in how he carried himself out as king that led him to not finish strong. And so Saul could not blame his eventual downfall on David. He couldn't blame it on anyone else, but on himself and his choice of what he did with his walk with God. Our finishing strong has less to do with us and amazing strategies, and more to do with our surrender to God. That's the big thing here. Our surrender to God will give us a different standard of how we operate, because we are serving God and not men. And it is that standard that would give us the courage to stand before people and ask them, have I wronged you in any way? Because we know the standard we were operating in. Our surrender to God means God is the one who will be guiding our path. And that God who's full of grace, even when we fumble and fall, will continually pick us up and put us back on the right path. David is a perfect example of that. How David, with all his blunders, at the end God says, this was a man after my own heart. It's an example of what God is asking of us and of how we will end up finishing strong. And so I want us to take a moment today as we close and pray to think through our own lives. For a second, just allow your life to flash through and think through, am I actually on a path that allows me to finish strong in this life? To think through the different responsibilities, roles, whether be it parenting or work, whatever the responsibilities and opportunities God has given to us. How am I carrying myself in them? And pretty much to ask, am I surrendered to God in all those areas? Am I fearing God and obeying his instructions in all the aspects of my life? Am I serving him or serving myself in the aspects of my life? And if God raises anything in your heart where you're falling short, would you be quick to surrender it to him and to turn to him in repentance and to lean on his grace to put you back on the right path?